Hey guys, it's Maymay. So we're going to continue in our card making series, and today we're going to discuss matting. Now you will remember that these are the card bases that we made early on in the series, and you guys all said you wanted to see me use these in future videos. So why do we mat cards? A couple of reasons. The first reason is for stability. I find that whenever I add mats to my cards, they feel richer and thicker, and I love that. Actually, I like to add 2 or 3 mats sometimes. That's just me because I think they get really thick on the front, really rich. I don't like to over mat the back. We'll talk about that as we get going. I feel like you can put so many mats on the front that the back gets kind of weak, and I don't like to do that. We also mat a card so that our foreground doesn't get lost in the background. Sometimes creating this barrier of color makes whatever we've put on the inside really pop, especially if we're using maybe a color in the middle that's not featured so much on the card base. We can kind of make that color pop. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this card, I have a lot of examples for you today because I just pulled into my stash and pulled out cards that were matted. This card actually has 3 mats. Here's the reason. I started out with a white card base, probably a pre-made card. This is from gosh, quite a few, I think at least last year, if not sooner than that. But I started out with this white card base, and before I got through making my focal image, I thought, you know what, we need more color. So if I had only put this focal image on a white card, it just wouldn't have popped the same. Do you see how on the side there, it just kind of drops into the background? That's what I mean by sometimes the focal image can just drop away and not have a definite pop. But by adding a yellow and a black layer, I was able to pull some colors out of here and really make this card have purpose, or at least make the eye kind of travel around the card comfortably. So what I did on this one, this is an A2 sized yellow square. It's actually the size of the card mat itself. Then this black mat underneath is 1/8 of an inch smaller. Can you see how I've got this skinny little line showing on the other side of the black? That's because I only cut this mat 1/8 of an inch smaller. Anytime you mat a card, whatever size you cut your base piece smaller, it will split the difference, and that's what you'll be left with on the edge of the card. We're going to look at that. It's hard to explain that by talking, but I'm going to show you the difference in a second. So this is a really good example of using mats. I think this really made this image pop. Without them, I feel like it would have just kind of dropped into the background and not been quite as, eye-catching of a card. Also, when I told you that I don't like to over mat the front to make the back weaker, this is enough mats. I wouldn't want to add another one here because these are pretty solid mats, and you can see how thick this is compared to how this is. I don't want to overdo it. Also, it kind of makes the card a little front heavy. If you have a friend or something that likes to stand their cards up, the more you add here, the less chance they have of it standing without tipping over. This one could tip forward really easy because it's pretty top heavy. Now there are stands you can make. There are easel cards you can make if you just really want to layer up, or if you like to do the shabby chic thing and add a whole bunch to it. There's ways around that. Let's talk about the sizing of mats, because this is where people get really confused. I'm going to get some paper out. I just got these 2 scraps of paper, and we're going to use the 3x3 card for me to show you because I can get more out of these scraps that way. So the first mat that you would imagine on this 3x3 card, like the standard mat, would be to cut a piece that is 1/4 of an inch smaller than the front of this card. So if this card is 3x3, then my first mat would be 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. Let's do one and look at that. Get my trimmer, bring it over. Okay, so I'm going to take this piece here. Let's do it with the red. And I'm going to trim this to 2 3/4. Again, I'm cutting it 1/4 of an inch smaller than my card mat. And then I'm going to cut it again, 2 3/4. Now, this paper is very fibrous. Now, the thing I want to remind you of is because I cut this 1/4 of an inch smaller than my card, that doesn't mean I'm going to have 1/4 of an inch border. That means I'm going to have a 1/8 of an inch border. Here's why. When we center this on the front of our card, we're centering that distance or that difference between the two pieces. If I were to take this to this top corner, then yes, I would have 1/4 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. And that's totally doable. If you like the way that looks, go with it. There are no hard and fast rules. But because I'm centering this, I'm basically turning that 1/4 of an inch into 1/8 of an inch. Does that make sense? I'm taking the 1/4 of an inch difference and splitting it on either side to give me 1/8 of an inch. This is where it gets so confusing for folks because they're like, I know that's not 1/4 of an inch. It's not. That's 1/8 of an inch all the way around. Now, if I wanted to mat again on top of this, I'd bring it down again. This time, I'm going to get really crazy, and let's use some black, and I'm going to only cut the page to where I'll get a 1/16 of an inch border, and let me show you what I mean. So if I cut my first one at 2 3/4, I'm going to cut this one at 2 5/8. This is not a standard mat size, so don't worry about remembering 2 5/8, but I just want to use it as an example. So by cutting this down 1/8 of an inch smaller than this mat piece we did earlier, watch what happens. Because it's only 1/8 of an inch smaller, look at the skinniness of that border. Because instead of having 1/8, we're splitting the difference and we're giving ourselves a 1/16 of an inch on either side. So when we take them down 1/4 of an inch, we get 1/8 inch border. And when we take them down 1/8 of an inch, we get a 1/16 of an inch border, which is really pretty. It adds a lot of interest. I really like, you see how I'm being very specific about laying that there so you can see it. I really like how that looks to have the bigger border and then the thinner border. I think that's really pretty. Now, do you have to do this? No, you can do whatever you want. Card making is all about your rules just right. That's how I want you to look at it. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. I'm going to glue these down, but I want to show you something. In all of the comments I've been getting, this is a big one. People struggle so much with getting their mats laid correctly, like getting them straight. I'm going to erase this because I may end up using this little guy. So I'm going to erase what is hanging out there on the bottom where I had written on it before. So I've zoomed in pretty close. If you are concerned about getting your mat straight, I want to show you something. If you use your cutting board or whatever you have, your cutting mat underneath where you have these grids and you line this up, you can take your Tim Holtz ruler or any ruler you have that is see-through and has these grids like this one does. And because I know that this piece is going to give me a 1/8 of an inch border, because remember we cut it at 1/4 of an inch smaller, I can take this ruler and I can lay it, because I can see through it, I can lay it on that 1/8 inch line down the card, just like so. And I can use this to help me match up on one edge, and I will know, let me move this out of the way, I will know that now I have a nice clean mat all the way around. Now, I would never do this because I eyeball everything, and I think we can get close enough with our own eyes not to have to do all this. But if I needed to, okay, I could put this ruler here where I can see through it. I know I'm on the 1/8 of an inch. I can make a little mark in one corner. So I've made a pencil mark at 1/8 of an inch in. Then I can come from the bottom, and I'm going to try to do this without getting into the camera. I'm over to the side. Line it up again, and I can make another little mark, okay? So now when I put my first mat on, if I want it nice and straight, I can line it up inside of those little marks. And look, I get a nice, even border all the way around. In my opinion, that is being too picky. Like, I don't want to do that. To me, that makes card making not fun. But I'm going to tell you something. For some folks, that makes card making fun because they like the precision of lining up card mats. So let's say that's what we want to do. We would then glue it down to that little corner that we know helps us line it up. If you need to do that, do that. Then on the second one, do the same thing. Just use your ruler, or here's what I like to do. I just eyeball. If I get one corner right, I can pretty much get the rest of them right. No one's going to notice if you're a tiny little bit off. No one's going to notice. Let's look at some samples of cards I've made in the past and show you how mats are used. One of my favorite examples is this one here that was made by my friend Karen. I love how she used mats. This is pretty common. I think they call this the triple mat technique. I'm not exactly sure, but what she did was she has 3 different size pieces of paper and 3 different mats. She matted each piece, and then when she stacks them on top of each other, she gets this beautiful kind of separation. That's using mats as like an art piece, and I think that is beautiful. I recreated something like that too. I did a video showing you how to do this one. I'll turn it sideways so you can see it. Doing the same thing, just playing with these purple mats. Isn't that cool? And basically, not exactly, but basically, watch the video. I'll link it below for you. Basically, these mats are just 1/4 of an inch larger than each piece. And I even left it where I had a little bit of the white showing on the outside of the card. So check out that video for that one if you want to know how to do that. Now this card doesn't even look matted until you get right up on it. You see on the side, I have a little foam underneath that top layer. So my decorative layer is here, but using the same paper to make a card base, I did this matte just for interest. So if you like the look of tone on tone, you can still use matte, and it's super cool. This one, which I think is super, super neat. I say this too much. I say super too much. This one I did as a design team project for my friend Gareth's store, which is called G's Embellishment Emporium. That's where these little glasses came from. I actually used matte as part of the design. So you see that my card base is brown. Then I have a little text pattern paper here, but see the stripe? The stripe is an inlay matte that I just cut. Actually, it's not even the same all the way around. It's less here, more here, and I didn't care. I wanted that kind of look, that not measured look. Then you may not can notice, but these guys are just pieces cut from paper, and they're not matted, but it feels like a lot of mats because of what I've got underneath it. So using mats in design is easy and cool, and it works. Let me show you this. This is just one piece of pattern paper as my mat. You can see I cut it 1/4 of an inch smaller, and then I did my design on top of it. This one I used the idea of matting, right? There's no mats in between each of these lines. I just use foam tape to stand them up. But this one's been in the window at the shop and it has started to buckle. Anytime they get near sun, be careful of that. We use these for display pieces, so they do that sometimes. But you can see how these separate, or these separate edges of the mats are just beautiful on this card, and it's just using the matting as a design. This one has no mat. You can do without mats. If you don't like them, don't use them. These one layer, or this one's not exactly one layer because I added some dimension here, but this is just a card base that's stamped on and then added a little dimension, and you don't have to use a mat. On this card, I wanted to point out that not only did I matte the card itself, I matted the sentiment so that it would pop off of this busy background. Had I not added this separation between the two, it would have just blended in. In my opinion, and what I use mats for is because I use them to make focal images pop, to bring things together, to maybe pull a color out of our design page here at the front and, make it really more of a showcase. Or think of it like a picture frame. Kind of when you add a picture frame to a picture, you want to make sure it's one that'll match the picture. That's kind of how I think of matting. So that's matting in a nutshell. That's kind of the way I think of matting a card. Now, if you need specific measurements, Tamitha has created for us a chart that goes along with our card base chart, and that is now posted on our blog. I'm going to link that blog post below so you can take a look at that. I hope this kind of clears up what matting is and helps you to decide, is matting for me? Is matting not for me? It might not be. If you'd like to see some inspiration, couple of ways you can see some great cards and some great talent. On our website, we have a new tab called Gallery. So if you go to our website, which is maymaymadeit.com, and you click on More, and then you do the drop down, it'll say Customer Gallery. Click there and look at all of the projects that the customers are making with the projects that we carry, or with the products that we carry. You'll be inspired. And go to our Facebook group called Maymay Made It, and so did I, and you'll be able to see all of these kinds of things, plus what the viewers like you are making, and it really just helps to inspire you for your card making or other projects. And if you'd like to share with us what you're making, please do that on our gallery or on our Facebook group. We would love to see it. Thanks so much for watching today. See you again next Tuesday for more card making. I think we've got a few more videos in this series. Talk to you again real soon. Bye-bye.